welcome to episode 157 of the Power Score LSAT podcast. I'm Dave Kaloran in Napa Valley.
And this is Jon Denning in Los Angeles.
John, how are you today?
I'm doing okay, man. I'm a little tired, as I know. Are you? I think I'm still recovering from an August test week, I'm honest.
There's a little bit of that. I'm recovering from the start of my child's school.
Oh.
So now all of a sudden I have to get up really early.
Yeah.
So it's terrible.
I'll stop complaining.
Yeah, 6:45 every day is not like make me smile.
No. There was also a makeup LSAT on Tuesday of this week, which ended up taking more of my time than I thought. I had a lot of people messaging me about that, which is good that many people were able to take it, and good that I had some answers for them, but definitely consumed most of that day.
It's funny because I think it's bad that many of them had to take it.
Yeah, I was trying to put a positive spin on it, but we're both right. I'm glad it's there for people. I wish no one had to use it.
Well, today we're going to talk about abnormal breaks in your admissions record. So we're kind of taking student questions on that. And I know, John, that you've made a drink selection that is abnormal. So tell me about that.
Yeah, we were talking about abnormal breaks as the theme for this. And I said, you know what? I could use an abnormal break from drinking, frankly. So I'm not drinking anything. I've got a Diet Coke, but it's a pretty PG afternoon over here. Pretty boring afternoon in LA.
You're drinking something.
Yeah.
Just not drinking your usual something.
Now, there's nothing else in the Diet Coke, which is what's abnormal.
There you go.
What about you?
I have gone in an abnormal direction for myself. I am actually drinking a little bit of gin. A friend of mine recently was like, we need to get you into gin. And so he knows who he is. But this isn't straight gin because that, of course, would be a death sentence for me. It's a drink called Aviation. And it is not named after the Ryan Reynolds Aviation Gin brand. It predates that. But it's got a couple ounces of gin in it. It's got some maraschino cherry liqueur in there, a bunch of lemon juice, and then it's got something called creme de violette, which is kind of like a lavender, almost flowery, citrusy kind of liqueur that is relatively rare, but they now are importing it, so it's kind of cool.
Interesting. Good for you. You went in a very different direction than I did, and I salute you for it.
Yeah, I don't hate it. It's got enough sugar in it that I can live with the gin. It overpowers that juniper kind of flavor that just, whatever. It's not my deal, man.
I already regret my choice. So, congratulations.
Nice.
You picked a song for us, too.
I did. I had a lot of ones. I wanted to come up with a song that had something to do with a hole or a break. And my first choice was actually going to be Ace in the Hole by Saint Motel because that's a cool band. So if you're not familiar with them, check them out. But I had to ultimately go with something that is a little bit more negative and perhaps powerful. I went with Down in a Hole by Alice in Chains, a song that is forever marked in my brain, John, by, God, it must have been 20, 25 years ago on a New Year's Eve. I got together with a bunch of my friends, and as we were all leaving at, say, like, God, I don't know, it was about 2:30 in the morning, one of my friends was just had his head hung over the speaker listening to this song at high volume, just generally drunk and sad. So,
that is a pitiful image, man.
Yeah, and I was kind of like tying that to the admissions because a lot of times people who have holes or abnormal breaks in their record are thinking, things are really bad or depressing, but they're not as depressing, hopefully, as they seem. And there's a way out of the wilderness is what we're going to talk about tonight.
Oh, there you go. It takes me back to the 90s. So thank you for the flashback.
One of the best albums out there, if you like that kind of 90s grunge rock, it is called Bones. Yeah. And it's by Alice in Chains.
Well, there we go.
Or Dirt actually is the album. Then Bones is the first song. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, it's all right. You're pretty encyclopedic with this stuff. I think you get a pass.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the LSAT world. Let's get down to business, Dave. And there's a couple of tests that are coming up pretty imminently, in fact. We're about 2 weeks away from September's kickoff, which is the next test, September 2024. Unfortunately, the registration deadline for that test passed quite a while ago, about a month ago, in fact, July 23rd. So if you aren't signed up for September, I saw somebody actually ask this question online the other day, is it too late? And I'm like, oh boy, is it. You cannot get into September. If you are signed up for September, though, your test dates will begin on Wednesday, September 4th. They'll run through that Saturday, which is the 7th. You will get your score back on Wednesday, September 25th, if nothing goes wrong and you have a completed writing sample on file. And then, of course, hot on the heels of that, about a month later, in fact, is the October test. This test, as of this recording, you can still sign up for, but as of this evening, it's going to cut off. We're recording this on a Thursday afternoon, the 22nd. Today is the last day to register for the October LSAT. However, LSAC did a slightly generous thing, which is they pushed back the refund date for that test to the day after August score release, which is the 28th of this month. So if you're signed up for October and you took, say, August, you get your score back on the 28th and you like it, you don't want to take October anymore, you've got until the next night, August 29th, to get your money back for October. So at least there's a little bit of a cushion there, a little bit of a buffer, which is nice. However, if you don't sign up by this evening for October, you're going to miss that date as well. Test dates there run Wednesday, the 2nd through, again, I believe Saturday, the 5th. If I'm not mistaken with that. And you'll get your scores back on a Wednesday as well, October 23rd for that test.
Yeah, and as you look at these two tests, they're both big ones. As we kind of get into this, the September test right now is just a shade above 24,000 registered, which that will come down. The October test is almost 28,000, and I imagine that will rise by tomorrow as you get this kind of like last minute influx of people who are kind of like signing up. So these are not small tests, and just that's not unexpected. This is the time of year when you see a lot of people taking the LSAT, and so we're really in the thick of things right now. Now that August is underway, the new test format, and as somebody asked me yesterday, these tests, they don't have logic games, right? I'm like, no.
No, they do not.
None of them have logic games, so you don't have to worry about it anymore. They seem pretty happy about that.
Before we move on, I have an on-the-fly correction to make, a self-edit to those October dates. They changed them fairly recently. So I think when we copied these dates down, LSAC has actually gone in and amended the days and the dates very slightly. That test in October actually starts on Tuesday, October 1st, and then will be on Wednesday, October 2nd. They skip, for unknown reasons, Thursday, October 3rd. There won't be any testing on the 3rd. And then finish up Friday and Saturday, October 4th and 5th.
That's right.
Yeah, so they've actually adjusted this somewhat recently, probably since
I'm not even sure they adjusted it, but they did this, and I've been meaning to ask them for a while, why did you put this hole in the middle of the test days? Because I feel like that is a questionable decision. I don't know. They must have a reason. So I will find the reason out, and when we have our next podcast and we mention the dates that are upcoming, I will talk about whatever the reason is, because I'd like to know the answer. I'm sure there's a good reason, because they would not do that. I don't know whether there's some kind of conflict with another test at the Prometric centers. That's a definite possibility. So we'll find out what the deal is and report back on that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, hopefully someone listened long enough to hear me correct it and didn't just jump right to their keyboards to complain. But my apologies either way. Tuesday the 1st through Saturday the 5th with a break on Thursday. That's your October.
Now, if you're taking one of those LSATs, there's always a plethora of webinars that you can attend that we offer that are free. And so the next 3 that are actually coming up, there is one on September 10th that is going to cover comparative reading passages in the reading comprehension section. Then there's another one on the 17th of September that is about parallel reasoning questions, those long guys, in the LR sections. And you can expect to see about 4 of those on any given test that are scored. And then on October 2nd, we're doing an LSAT 101, which of course now covers the LSAT without logic games in it. And then, John, as you and I have been just talking about recently, we have made some decisions regarding updates to the crystal ball for September, as well as new crystal balls for the October and November LSATs. You want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, you and I have both been getting peppered pretty constantly about when we're going to do these things, what happens, especially for October and November, because obviously we did a different thing for August, and now as we're about to talk about for September, where because we included real test content, we weren't able to make that crystal ball session public. We had to restrict it to people with a Law Hub subscription, which means we could only allow our students who have confirmed subscriptions into the session and watch the video. People keep asking me for a link to the video. Sorry, I cannot. By LSAC rules, I cannot send it to you.
And let me stop you right there for just 1 second, because as you and I know, LSAC does check this.
Yeah,
and they've checked us on this. Mm-hmm. They asked about the use of questions in there to make sure that it not only was a question that we could use, so that it wasn't, and there's we'll talk about that in the future.
Sure.
As well as to make sure that we had limited the enrollment to just our students. So we got checked on that. And I was quite happy in that discussion to be able to say, no, it's totally straight. We've got it.
Yeah, we played it by the book, thank goodness.
I'm very happy we did that.
Yeah. I mean, and frankly, I'm very happy that we chose to include the question and the nature of the question that we did, because as we have been alluding to and even talked about in our August recap, there is a certain type of question that's coming out more and more often in logical reasoning, mostly still experimental, but it's creeping its way into new content that does deal in fairly comprehensive formal logic and conditional reasoning. We showed an actual example of that to the people in the room. They found that helpful. We'll allude to it more in the crystal ball coming up that we're about to talk about, but we won't be showing a real question in this next one. Before I get to the crystal ball, go ahead, sorry.
And I was going to say, and also numbers and percentages stuff. And we're not saying that it's going to show up in September. We don't know when it's going to show up. We don't try to predict the appearance of experimental sections. But as you said, we've seen it in experimental sections. And the reason they're testing it in experimental sections is because they intend to put it on the exam in the future. So we know it's coming. We're just not saying when because we don't really know, and nobody does.
Yeah, it's not just for fun. They're doing this as a precursor. So speaking of precursors, let's talk about what we're going to do between now and September. What we're going to do, we did this for June as well, we're going to do what we call a mini ball, which is essentially just a slight update and edit to the full crystal ball that we had originally recorded for August and September. Now that August has passed and we've learned a lot, and a lot of our predictions fortunately came true, they took a lot of content kind of off the map as a potential for reuse. So when we think about September, there's a slightly narrower set of ideas, content, concepts, and test reuses that we expect. So we're going to make an update to that August-September crystal ball. Again, we call it the mini ball. We'll probably record that, what do you think, tomorrow?
I think we've gone through it, we've talked through it. I think tomorrow we'll record it. And then this is the interesting thing. This is not a public webinar. We're not going to do it live. We don't feel like there's enough to justify doing it live. I don't think it's going to last more than 30 minutes. We've cut down all the stuff that we're doing. We're going to focus just on updating the test prediction and then the suggested problem sets and, kind of like topics to review. So I think it's going to be fairly quick and dirty in terms of that. And then when we record it, because it's an add-on to the original crystal ball for August and September, this one will go directly into the PowerScore student centers. It will not be made public because you can't view this without having the first one as a companion piece.
Yeah, this doesn't make sense as a standalone.
Yeah. My suspicion, John, is that we'll record it tomorrow, then it'll go through sound and video processing, and it probably will get posted into our student centers on Monday.
Yeah, it's my best guess as well. So if you are a student of ours, you will see that early next week. If you're going to become a student of ours pre-September, you'll have access to it the second you enroll and get logged in.
Exactly.
So that's kind of neat. What most people here listening to this, though, I think will appreciate even more is that we are going to do a full public Crystal Ball, a live event for October and November. So back to the good old days of how it used to be before we decided to include questions. We're going to record that on Wednesday evening, September 18th. That'll kick off at 8 p.m. Eastern, so 5 p.m. for you and me, Dave. And again, that will be open to anyone and everyone. It's free, and we will make the recording available to anyone who signs up for it, even if you can't make the live event. Although we hope you do. The live events are fun and really engaging. Yeah.
There'll be a lot of people there. It's always fun to have a big event. And to be entirely honest about this is what we were hoping to do.
Yeah.
When we decided to pull August and September back behind a curtain, so to speak, because we really wanted to be careful with those. We said that, hey, if they don't make a big sea change, if they don't do some kind of crazy new direction and things go as we expect them to, and our predictions are on the money, we'll return this to the public sphere. So that's the first thing. It is free. Anyone can attend. And the second thing is it's not just a one night only deal. We will then make the recording available to anybody who signs up for it through our website. So by the time this comes out, John, I don't know if they will have posted that webinar because you and I made the final decision on the date and time literally about 2 minutes before we started here. but it will be up over the next few days. When you go to our website at the top, there's like a little resource thing under the LSAT side. You look for webinars and it'll show up there. But we definitely encourage everyone to come back and join us for that. And I can't tell you how happy I am to be able to return it to the public. That was my hope the entire time, because the alternative was that we were going to end these. If we didn't feel like what they were doing was predictable anymore, we were going to walk away. We don't have to do that. And I think we can both feel good about that. So it'll go back to what we consider to be normal. This is what we had said all along. And I feel like we have come good on our promise to that.
Yeah. I hope you didn't just jinx us for September, but I like our odds. I think we're okay. August made me feel a lot better about it.
Look, just getting August and being able to get as much of it and as many of the tests predicted made me feel like, okay, they're not just all of a sudden taking a left turn and I don't have any idea what they're up to. So I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, me too.
All right, let's turn to the topic du jour, which, as I said before, is these abnormal breaks or holes in your record. And I don't think this will take all that long, but I think it's a really interesting topic because we've been able to talk about breaks or kind of like holes in the record, whether it deals with GPA, multiple LSATs, even breaks from school, and so forth. And so we're just going to run through a few questions here and then maybe talk about what you would do from an application standpoint to deal with some of these so-called problems.
Perfect.
So, John, do you want to take the first one and read it, or do you want me to?
I'll jump in here with the first one. Before I do that, I was laughing a second ago when you said topic du jour about that Dumb and Dumber line where Carrie asked the waitress, "What is the soup du jour?" And she says, "It's the soup of the day." And he says, "Sounds good. I'll have that." That's what it just made me think of. Sorry.
I haven't seen that movie other than when it came out, so it's been a while.
Yeah, that's the kick his ass sea bass scene. So, sorry for the complete tangent. My brain is mashed potatoes. So. Let me take this first example. And we've kind of categorized these with a few different tags, but let me just read what the question was, the scenario and the question, and then we'll talk about really what it looks like and what to do. So this is what we heard from someone. This is what we were asked. It says, "I initially did not take college seriously, did poorly, then I dropped out and took a few years off before returning to college. At that point, I did significantly better, but still not well enough to bring my GPA towards most schools' medians. What do I do?" So I think this is maybe going to be the most common scenario for a lot of the people listening to this. It reminds me of me a little bit. Where I certainly didn't go in with a tremendous amount of focus. So someone starts, I didn't drop out either, so this isn't quite me, but someone starts, they struggle, they just don't quite have their head in the right space. They do the, I think, sensible thing, which is step away before you make matters worse. Come back and succeed, but again, GPAs are still averages. They had this anchor from the first bit.
Yeah, and it's doubly funny because this also describes me, although I too did not drop out.
Yeah.
When I got to college, I was, to put it mildly, chasing girls for the first 2 years and just having fun. Back then, the drinking age was 18, so life was good. It actually changed while I was in college. That was a night of rioting. Pretty interesting to see. So I had a lot of fun my first 2 years, and then I was like, uh-oh, I better shape up.
Yeah.
And so the last 2 years, then I crushed it. And I think that was to everybody's surprise. Not mine, but to everybody else's. So I really understand this. And I think a lot of people would say, hey, they've had that same experience. They didn't necessarily start off well. And it doesn't really matter what the reason was. It could be that you were struggling or, you were missing home or whatever the case may be. That's not the important part of this question. The important part of this question is really to kind of go down that idea of saying, how do you face this and where does it actually go in terms of looking at what's actually happening? And here's the first thing, and this is the bad news, is that the GPA, no matter how long ago it was, no matter what happened, what type of break, and this person had a break of several years, you're still going to get a final undergraduate GPA, and that is essentially permanent. You cannot change that. You can't go out and get a graduate school GPA and raise it up. And so despite the improvement in the the kind of like the second chance time here.
Yeah, the
this
trend.
is still going, it's still going to hurt you. If you've come out and you've got, say, a 3.0 after it all worked out, or a 2.8, even if your last 2 years were like a 4.0, the school will appreciate that. And that's something you're going to play up when you address this. But you're not going to be able to get away from the fact that you're way under the median. And if they accept you, it will count against their median. I hate the way this rule works. I wish there was a way for the schools or something to say, hey, if your GPA is of a certain age, it no longer is applicable because you're a totally new person. But that is not how this system works. So the bad news here is that this is still going to hurt you.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up what is to me really the most quantifiable piece of this. The most measurable piece is that GPA is a number that will follow you around no matter what. And the trend that produced it from bad to good or vice versa doesn't matter. You're still just that number to these schools. So what do you do then to try to soften the blow that GPA is probably going to cause you when you try to apply?
I think there's a fairly straightforward way to deal with this. First off, you have to deal with it. You have to write out an addendum that is going to address the GPA situation, because it raises what I call the natural question. If I look at your transcript, I'm like, 12 years ago, terrible grades, comes back, kills it. What happened? And that's the natural question that anyone would ask if they were reading this. And you immediately are like, what happened? And whenever that comes up in an application, whether it's this or anything else, you want to answer that for the reader. So write an addendum and address that lower GPA. Be honest. It's not a weakness to admit that I wasn't ready. And as you said, Jon, it's kind of a strength to cut it off before it got any worse and be like, that was just the best decision. Talk about what you've done in the interim, because obviously for 12 years, you didn't just sit on your couch, hopefully, and you've done things and you've had success in your life. Point to those, talk about how your life has changed, and then talk about how the second GPA is really the accurate one and reflects the value that you put on kind of like your academic performance and the type of work that you will put into it. You can't eliminate the lower GPA. It is something that you're going to have to deal with, and you're going to end up in a kind of, hopefully, a splitter type of situation. So the best you can do is explain it. And what'll happen is if they like everything else, they'll say, all right, look, let's try to work around the lower GPA and offset it with some other student who has a 4.0 or something like that, because we think this person is going to succeed at our law school. Is that law school likely to be Yale? No. This is going to knock you out of really a lot of top schools where the GPAs are so high, but it won't knock you out of law school. It's not prohibitive. Just because there's this big break in your record, the fact that you went from bad to good is actually something that you can kind of sell, kind of a refurbishment of your life type of thing.
Yeah, this is a much better scenario than the alternative, or the inverse, which would be, I killed it my freshman and sophomore year, 4.0 straight through. But my junior and senior year, I got caught up in whatever, or I started partying too much, or I didn't take it as seriously. That's a trend that is harder to defend or justify. The newer version of you did worse than the original one. This flips it. So at least in this, you're showing a trend in the right direction. I think you can lean into that as you write it.
Yeah, you're supposed to get better as you get older, not the reverse.
That's what I've heard. Let's shut up.
You can fight against type? Is that what you're up to?
That's me, buddy. Let's look at a second one. You want to read this one?
I do.
All right.
A little bit more about GPA, and then we'll jump off GPA. It says, my college transcripts have a very bad semester in my sophomore year. I had a problem with a roommate, think stalker, and it severely affected my grades. After I got out of that situation, things returned to normal and I was able to return my grades to their prior level, which was near 4.0. What do I do?
Yeah, this is obviously very similar in many ways to the first question that we looked at. The bad GPA, at least, is a common theme. In this case, I think it's even more explicable because there was a very direct situation that happened, and it was confined from what it sounds like. This one semester sophomore year where things went worse. But you can see overall that was clearly the outlier or the exception, not the norm. So similar to the first question, my advice would be explain what happened. Explain how it affected you. You don't have to go into too many personal details, that parenthetical think stalker that you mentioned. I think you could elaborate on that a little bit, but you don't have to do anything that's just overly vulnerable, overly personal. But I do think it's important that people realize that something beyond your control happened to you. You were affected by this. It wasn't a choice, and it wasn't your fault.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I will remind everybody that law school applications are confidential, and they stay within the admissions office. They're not passed around to students or anything like that. You have to be approved to read those. And so you can actually disclose something that is more personal. And to be honest with you, if there is a spot to do it, it is in the application, because it helps them see you as a human and understand exactly the type of challenges that you faced. But it is confidential in case anybody is concerned about that. But the real focus here, Jon, is as you're kind of pointing out, is that once the problem goes away, or is removed or solved, things return to normal with your grades.
Right.
And just assure them that this was, caused by a one-type unique scenario, and it's not going to happen again. You'll be fine.
Yeah. And I want to emphasize that last point in particular, which is a lot of what schools are looking for beyond just the quantifiers, GPA, LSAT, is they want to have full faith that the people they're letting in have the ability to succeed, and that any problems that occurred in the past truly are in the past, that this isn't going to be some sort of ongoing thing. I see people write addendums sometimes where they don't make it clear that whatever issues they faced that led to these sorts of problems have been resolved. And so the question naturally lingers, is this something we should still be concerned about? Is this something that could kind of rear its ugly head once more? And one of the things that you really want to try to accomplish with these addenda is reassuring the schools that, listen, I'm not the person that this one instance might lead you to believe. This is an isolated one-off. You've got nothing to worry about with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the key points to try to emphasize here too, is just making schools feel comfortable, reassured that letting you in isn't going to lead to any kind of repeat patterns that maybe your past demonstrates. Yeah,
it's a break in your record, but it's not a permanent break.
Right.
You had a problem, you dealt with it, you came right back. You are still who you are. Let's go to the next question.
Cool. Let's get more to the LSAT side of things, where I think you and I prefer to live. So here we go. I'll read this one. It says, I took my first LSAT 4 years ago on a whim and did not do well at all, sub 150. I took this past June and did much better after taking your Power Score course, scoring a 171. It's pretty great. I feel like I need to address this large scoring difference, but do I need to, since the scores are so far apart? Which, first of all, congratulations on the huge improvement, and I'm happy to hear that it was our course that helped. That's always gratifying. Well done.
Never hurts. I always like good news.
Yeah.
By the way, the first thing here is this is still on your record because it's within 5 years.
Right.
So they will be able to see it. If that first LSAT was like 10 years ago, I'd be like, they won't see it. It'll have dropped off and it won't be visible. So this break here is short enough that it stays on your record, and not long enough to push it off. It'll go off in another year.
Right.
So there is that. So you could, maybe the dates, if you played with it, you might wait or something like that. But the good news is as they look at these two for their purposes, as you know, Jon, they use the high score.
Yeah.
Because that's what they report to the ABA. That's what gets used for rankings and all that stuff thereafter.
Yeah, especially when they're presumably like 25 points apart.
Yeah. And, the thing is that there's not just a huge difference here, which emphasizes the more recent score. Most law schools want a score from the past 3 years. So even though they stay on your record for 5, they want something 3 years or more recent. So the old score is even less important to them. However, let me ask you this. If I send in an application and there's a score that's like 148 from 4 years ago, and now there's a score of 171, does that raise any questions in your mind?
Well, I like the way, as soon as you said, however, I knew this was coming. To me, the way that I tend to think about addenda in general, and applications really in general, is put yourself in the position of the person reading it and think, if you didn't know anything but what was on that paper or on that report, if any questions would come to your mind, would it raise a question or concern for you? In this case, if I'm reading this, I definitely have some questions. What happened? Why was there a 4-year gap? What did you do? How did you improve this much? Explain yourself, basically.
Yeah, it's a natural question.
It's a natural question. And that's what I'm always thinking about. What happened in this sophomore year that caused this, 4.0 student to get a 1.3? Why was there this 2 years of college and however many years off and then two? These are the kinds of questions that people naturally ask. They're not bad questions and they don't necessarily imply a bad answer, but they do need to be answered. So anticipate. This is a question I would have, so anticipate. And again, this is why an addendum is such a useful tool.
Yeah, it's what I call the tabloid effect. People are curious. Yeah. It's why the tabloids are sitting there right as you're checking out in the grocery, and they've got all these garish headlines, and you're like, ooh, what is that? And you want to kind of like see what's going on with Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie or whoever it may actually be that's floating around.
I think the most recent's probably J-Lo and Ben. God, I can't stop reading about what a tragic love story.
Bennifer, they shouldn't have gotten back together. And I like Ben Affleck, all the way back to the days of Dazed and Confused. He played O'Banion, one of my favorite characters, and very villainous at the high school level in that movie. And so it's nothing personal against them, but I'm like, really, why? You did it once. It didn't work out. It looks like you're just bouncing around trying to hope that things will stick together. However, tabloid commentary aside, when you're standing in that line and you see that tabloid, you're like, you're interested. Yeah. The law school admissions readers and the adcoms they're people. They have the same curiosity. So if you look at a record like that, we would all be like, I wonder what happened. Yeah. Tell them the story of what happened. Obviously, you're going to tell it in a way that is beneficial to you. So you can explain, for example, that you just didn't know you were supposed to prepare and you walked in and unfortunately it was a mistake and you should not have kept your score, and you've learned from that. And this time around, you really put in some effort and you've shown your true potential, and that potential is exactly what you'll bring to law school because now you understand the task at hand. That just checks a box where they're like, oh, okay, kind of what they probably thought. And who knows, maybe they had technical issues the first time around. If that's the case, you can share those and they can at least understand it. But what they're looking for is not something that says, gosh, I love this applicant, I'm going to let them in. That's not going to happen in an addendum about this. What you're looking for is them to say, oh, that's what I thought, sounds good.
Yeah.
Checks the box, move on. Let other parts of your application impress them. Use something like this to actually eliminate doubt or confusion.
Yeah. I was just thinking, if I'm Ben Affleck's next girlfriend, I would expect an addendum. What is this record you have, Ben? And how am I different? I have questions. And that's just really the same. Yeah, it's the same principle here, really. It's just eliminate confusion if there's anything in your track record that might arouse some confusion or some suspicions.
They need to ask about why the back tattoo, Ben. What were you thinking, buddy? I'm telling you, though, he blew it with Jennifer Garner. She's awesome. He should have just stuck with her. They have kids. It's like, why do you leave America's sweetheart, the girl next door? I don't get you.
I didn't mean to take us down this road. I'm sorry.
I think I took us down this road.
You definitely took us further.
I think we both did it. Anyway, like I said, they're both talented. I just don't think they should be in a relationship. And I can also say with authority, I don't know either of them at all.
Yeah.
So take my advice with a grain of salt.
Tabloids aside. But notice the theme that's kind of running through all of the ones we've done so far. First is, do you think this would arouse or lead to some sort of question on the part of someone reading it, an adcom? If so, you should explain it. And then it's really just a matter of how you go about executing the explanation and what it is that you're trying to demonstrate with that explanation. It's not excuses. It can be really matter of fact, but then also trying to impart the idea of like, but I'm a safe bet. This isn't something you have to worry about.
All right. So let's go to the next kind of break situation. And this is someone talking about their undergraduate record. And they comment, I took 2 leaves of absence to deal with family health issues. How much of a problem is this?
I mean, this is really not a big deal at all. Time off from school in the first place isn't a red flag, in part because it hopefully doesn't affect the things that they do try to quantify and measure, the stats that they check, which in this case would be GPA. Taking time off from school, as long as, again, your grades aren't affected by it, that's an entirely explicable thing, and this is a pretty good explanation. Yeah,
family health issues is probably the easiest thing to claim as being a galvanizing factor in needing to leave school.
Yeah.
I had to help others in my family. Anyone who can't understand that shouldn't be reading law school applications. And so you really don't find too many of them out there doing that. They are going to be empathetic to this situation. They're going to understand it. You're going to get a free pass immediately on that. And even if it was other issues, you can simply explain that you are, dealing with things, and that might be something that might have been personal. You might have taken a mental health break, could have been financial. You could certainly disclose that. If the money ran out and you're like, I'm still trying to work things out and I needed to take time off from school to work or to get my finances in order or my family's finances, completely reasonable.
Yeah. The only point I'll add, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is a non-starter issue. It's not an issue at all.
Yeah, I'll add the point or reiterate because I've already made it, which is the only thing I'd be thinking here if I were to explain this to schools is trying to make sure that they realize that it's finished, that this isn't some ongoing threat to your, continued participation in school. I'm not going to have to continue doing this, but there was a moment, where my dad was sick or something.
So you really want them to say, Grandma died, so it's no more problems.
I wasn't going to use that, but it did occur to me.
I'm in a dark mood today. After citing Down in a Hole by Alice in Chains, this was clearly going to be a darker episode.
But yeah, so if Grandma's dead, they got nothing to worry about.
Oh, I love it. Let's go to the last question here, which is a very interesting one.
Yeah.
I have a criminal history from my teenage years, which are now over 15 years ago, and I need advice or help with navigating through an addendum to go along with my personal statement. So first off, something really bad a long time ago, and then a long break in time, and now you're coming back and you want to address it. How do you handle that?
I mean, the vagary here makes it a little tricky because the first thing I'd want to know is exactly what kind of criminal history you have. What did you do exactly? Because obviously there's a wide spectrum of things from very serious to, you could call it fairly minor. I got a DUI when I was 19 or something versus I murdered someone. That's why Grandma's dead.
I was going to say, did you murder Grandma?
You're going to make it. I just saw it coming, so I figured I'd beat you to it. So that's the first thing is, was it some sort of violent personal crime? Was it a series of arsons? Did you rob several banks? These are very likely disqualifying to becoming a lawyer in the first place because of the character and fitness stuff that you have to pass later. So that's the first thing I'd look into if I'm this person is like, have I actually done something that's still on my record that would prohibit me from even getting approved to practice law? And assuming that's not the case, then we can have the conversation about schools.
Yeah, if it is disqualifying, you're going to probably have to walk away from the law school path. And I'll cite an example. This came up in our admissions consulting a couple of years back, I think. Time is malleable, elastic to me. And one of the things when we work with our admissions consultants is that I work with them very closely. And we often have conversations about certain situations. And we had someone come in and say, I really want your help. And not me personally, but PowerScore's help. And they had a criminal record. And I was, it was forwarded to me and they're like, what's your thoughts on this? And this was one of the few times where I looked at something and I said, this is going to be disqualifying.
Yeah.
This person had been convicted of embezzlement. They worked at an office job and they controlled some of the money, and it turns out that they were taking the money and they got convicted. And then 2 years later, they got convicted again. It was either 2 or 3 years later they were convicted, and they were saying, I really learned my lesson. And I was like, the first time you did it, that would have actually been borderline, because embezzlement is a character type of thing. You've done something where you stole from others when you were in a position of trust. If you're an attorney, you have that opportunity with payments coming in and settlements and so forth. This is an immediate red flag. But to have done it a second time, I immediately told the person, I said, this is a situation where we won't take your money. We don't think we can get you through the law school process in order to be, I don't think any law school is going to let you in. And if they did somehow, which I would find to be crazy, I don't think the bar is going to let you pass the character and fitness. And so we actually turned them down as a client because I was like, I don't think anyone can help you. And if someone starts telling you that they can get you in and through, I would be very wary. I think they're trying to take your money in the same way you took everyone else's money.
Yeah. Fool me once, right? I've seen a few criminal cases like that come through over the years. Most of the time, as we'll continue this discussion here, hopefully this is the case with this person, but most of the time it's something minor enough that it can be explained, at least maybe not away, but at least explained in a way that makes law schools comfortable enough to give you a chance. But every once in a while, there is something so severe, so significant. So I've seen a couple that I could only describe as like heinous. There was one about a guy who was putting like cameras in women's locker rooms and stuff. Some things like that. Yeah. And he was convicted and had to pay a huge fine, went to prison. As he should have. So things like that where I'm like, not only will we not help you, but don't even go get your life together elsewhere, man. But if this is something less than that, then we can have a conversation about addendums and we can help people.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the case. If it's an insurmountable problem, the person probably knows that's the issue. However, if this is something like you were 16 and you breaking and entering, right? Let's say something like that sounds pretty bad, and then you have gone 15 years and you've established a career, maybe a family. You've got stability in your job and your housing and so forth. And you've, by all purposes, you've lived what people would say is a normal life, with no further transgressions, no criminal record. That's something you can explain. The follies of youth, so to speak. Right. And there's all sorts of variations on that. The DUI is a classic one. There's a number of people who get DUIs in college for whatever reasons. I've seen them successfully navigate that to get into top 14 schools. Sure. You can overcome. It is surmountable there. But the right approach, as noted in the question here, is to hit an addendum about it and explain what you did. That's the very first and most important thing. What happened? Don't make excuses. Don't say I got induced into doing it by my bad friends, or society owes me. Right. And so I was just taking back what was mine. Take ownership of it. Talk now about what you've learned from it and how your life is completely different and you're just really a different person than you were. And there's no chance of relapse. I've had no issues since then. I'm embarrassed by what I did when I was a youth. I wish I could turn the clock back, but obviously we can't. The good news is I learned from it. I improved from it. That's what they really want to see. They want to see someone take a situation that was bad and turn it into a positive in their life. And here's a really interesting kind of angle you can take with this. This put you in the justice system. Mm-hmm. You might have had probation. I'm not sure what else might have happened here. It's really unclear. But you had an up close and very personal look at the justice system. So when you start talking about law school, you've already got a firsthand experience with it. I'm not sure that fits with your legal goals, but if it does, if you're like, hey, I want to represent wayward youth, then you're the right person for that, because you're like, look, I was where you were. Let me get you out of this and let's work on getting you on the right path. So you could actually turn it into something where it's like, I bring a perspective to law school. Not everybody in the room is going to have. I can actually talk about what it's like to be arrested and what have you. That isn't the biggest positive in the world, but it turns it into a slight bump there where it's like, yeah, this person does have a different view. And this kind of like aligns with what they want to do in law school and then as a lawyer afterwards.
Yeah, I like that. There's an interesting kind of sweet spot with acknowledgement and contrition and the idea of like, but this opened some doors for me. This opened my eyes to things I wasn't aware of before. And frankly, I'm compelled by it. The one thing you don't want to do, and I think you alluded to this, but a specific example just came to mind, which is you don't want to be defensive and you don't want to make it seem like I didn't do anything wrong. I'm a victim of the system or something. I was talking to somebody once, not all that long ago, and they had a drug possession charge from when they were like 19. I think they had like some weed. Huh. And the first thing they said to me was basically like, this is ridiculous. It should be legalized everywhere anyway. Why in the world is I even punished for a crime that's not even... And I was like, let me stop you right there. If this is the tone you take when you go to a law school, it's going to be immediately problematic. Just say you did the wrong thing, you realize it, own up to it, be apologetic and contrite, and then move forward with something positive that you gained or learned. That's the way to approach this.
Yeah, let the admission committee member say, that's ridiculous, that's not even a crime in most states now, and there's people in prison who shouldn't be there. Let them draw that conclusion and have that reaction. don't give that on, kind of like your writing style or the tone that you take in your paper. That would be a very bad thing. You're totally right.
Yeah. Anyway, that example just came to mind because it wasn't all that long ago that I experienced it. Let me stop you right there, buddy.
Let me stop you and give you a lesson. You are starting to mature, Jon. There's hope for you.
Oh, well, you learn how to play the game.
It's not maturity, it's savvy, says Jon.
It's just experience.
Well, that actually brings us to the end of kind of like these little breaks that we wanted to talk about, holes in the record, so to speak. I feel like we've kind of summarized it pretty good. And literally, if you're a person who has one of these types of issues on your record, this gives you the opportunity to kind of think about how would you present it. There are right ways to navigate this where you can mitigate the damage and at times turn this into a little bit of a positive depending upon the circumstances. So look to try to do that. But this is all about, hey, I learned from what happened. I've improved since then. And that does not show who I was. What I've done more recently is my actual true potential.
I love it. I've got nothing to add to that. I will just add one reminder for our students. Keep an eye out for that mini ball that we're going to post in your student centers here early next week. Use that in this final stretch into September. And if you're not one of our students, we're still wishing you the best of luck down the stretch here into September. Study hard, keep your head up, and finish strong. We're pulling for you.
Yeah, and if you're not one of our students, but you're taking October and November, remember that we're going to do that full-on free crystal ball on September 18th at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. That will go up on our webinar page on our website over the next few days, so you can sign up for free. Hopefully, it should be quick and easy to do so. And on that note, if you get a chance, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere else that you may find it. And if you've enjoyed it, you can leave us a comment or rating as well. And if you have any questions, as you can tell from this episode, we often talk about questions that we get. You can send those to lsatpodcast@powerscore.com. On behalf of Jon and myself, we hope you've enjoyed it. We'll talk to you soon when we recap the September 2024 LSAT. It's still August now, but we're going to be recapping September 24 relatively soon in just a couple weeks here. Join us for that. In the meantime, stay safe out there.